Greetings everybody, this is Michael Phoenix Art here, and today I'm going to talk a little bit about UFOs, aliens, abductions, and these kind of things. It's a big deal for a lot of people nowadays. There's a lot of information coming forward, there's a lot of stuff coming up in the governments, as well as people coming forward with their experiences. And I've had some real practical experience in my life with all of this stuff with this subject. So I'm going to talk a little bit about it. It's interesting. It's something I've been interested in for a long time, but I'm not obsessed with it. I feel like there can be an over-obsession with anything in the world, like conspiracy theories or aliens. And there's a lot of misinformation in the world because of the technology age. There's a lot of misinformation as well as information, and if you're not good at figuring out what is true and what is not, if you don't have a good process of elimination to find out what is credible and what is just speculation, then you're probably not getting the truth or even the full truth if you are getting some facts. So I look at everything with a bit of reason, and I am a very esoteric person. So I also work a lot with the metaphysical and the esoteric side of things. I believe it makes a whole when it comes to truth and fact. So today I'll start by saying I've had my own experiences, and I've validated them through multiple different processes, like hypnosis, regression, meditation, countless hours of meditative reflection on things to really find out the source of what it is. I've studied psychology since the early 90s all the way up and even to this current day. So I work a lot with the psychological in life, as well as being a shaman. I also work with the psychology of the soul. They're two different processes, two different frames of reference, but yet they are significantly connected. So the first experience I had, now mind you, I was born with certain faculties turned on, whether you believe that or not, that's just the truth. So I've had a lot of other spiritual, esoteric, and exoteric experiences in my life. So there are things within me that are a little enhanced. So you'll have to take that into consideration. And then take into consideration, I've been trained to experience certain things by long, vast lineages of people who have specialties in experiencing these things. That's my path, that's what I do to this current date. So take all that into consideration, as well as I've studied a lot of this stuff for years on my own and through conventional academic ways. So my first experience is when I was 7 years old. I was living with my mom, my dad, and my brother, and we were living with my grandfather and my grandmother. We had various uncles in the area, but we lived out in a place called Jewel, New York, which is right on Oneida Lake. And it's more towards the, I believe, the eastern side of the lake, going more northern, in upstate New York. So I was 7 years old, around 7 years old, which is a specific time for the soul in one's life, I'll add. And I thought for a long time this was a dream, but there's other people who have validated this experience and this phenomenon. So it later became recognized to me that it wasn't a dream, and now where I'm at, I recognize the signs of things that are not a dream and that are experiences in the astral body or otherwise. So 7 years old, I hear a voice, and it's calling to me in the middle of the night. It's a dark night. It's very cold out. I think it was probably September or October. And the sky, I remember the sky was very, very open. And so I hear a voice. And I think at the time I had like a teddy bear or blanket or something with me. And I grabbed this thing and I walked down the stairs, through the house. Everyone was sleeping. There's no way anyone would have heard me, really. unless they were up. And I walked out the front door, and the front door gives way to a huge backyard and a giant field to the side and a creek down in the back. And I remember looking up to the sky and seeing what looked like a Ferris wheel with multicolored lights going like this. And I remember feeling very excited about this ride, this Ferris wheel, that I could go on it. And as the Ferris wheel turned, it slowly started to turn like this. And then all of a sudden it was moving like this. And I had no frame of reference. It still was a Ferris wheel in my mind. And I was like, this is great. And then I remember like the moonlight just getting really, 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 really bright. Yet I don't remember there being a moon. And the light was very bright. And all of a sudden, my next memory is I was on I was in some kind of building, it seemed. And it was really dark everywhere. The walls were like blackish, grayish, metal or something like that. And I remember walking through doors, and as I walked through each door there was a different room, and I don't remember much in the rooms, but I remember at one point I was wearing like a white hospital gown almost looking, and I was running through the place playing hide and seek with another person. It was a small little girl with blonde hair, and I was running through the corridors of this building. And we were playing hide and seek, and at one point she had hid behind this glass wall. Now mind you, I had no frame of reference for these things at this age. But when I looked through the glass wall, I clearly saw in this glass wall were jars of fetuses. Now I remember this, but I don't remember actually what I was seeing. I didn't know what I was seeing. I didn't know what a fetus was at the time. I had no reference for these things. But that's exactly what I saw, like a little tiny person in a jar with the cord. Odd, strange. Also, it's kind of like Hallmark, but that is what it was. And at one point, I was running and chasing this little girl, and a door opened up. And in the door, there was a very tall black person. Their skin wasn't African American. It was pitch black, like wearing leather. Only the leather looked like it was wet. And the face was a little longer, and yes, it had like the typical big eyes. And the head was just a little bit bigger than a normal person's head. But they were very tall. They were probably, 7 foot tall. And very skinny, and looked wet, almost like an aquatic creature, like an amphibian. And it looked at me, and I looked at it, and I wasn't scared or anything. Again, I feel like maybe I had no frame of reference of what I was looking at, but like sympathetically, almost telepathically, I got the feeling from this creature, this being, that I wasn't in any danger, that there wasn't any harm. But at the same time, I got like no emotion from it at the same time. It's very interesting. It just kind of studied me and looked at me like this. And I could see that it was doing something on like a table. And there was like some metal and stuff. And that's all I remember. And then I woke up the next morning. Now after this, years later, I had got into hypnotherapy, and I started doing a lot of hypnotherapy and a lot of self-hypnosis. Never once did it occur to me to try this out on myself. So I called up a friend, and he did some hypnotherapy on me, and he regressed me back to this experience, which I was actually kind of scared of repeating. And when he regressed me, what we found during the regression is that when I walked outside, there was a big black being waiting for me. And he gave me, like, his name was like Charlie or something like that, which, upon thinking about, like, who's afraid of Charlie. So I took this being's hand, and a shaft of light came down, it was very warm, and boom, we were on the ship. And that's what it was. It wasn't a building, it was a ship. And so we were in this ship, and I remember looking out a port at one point during the regression and seeing planets I didn't recognize, stars, and being really far, far out there. Upon further investigation, I ended up on a table, and the one being that was the tall black being, whose name was Charlie, was definitely poking me and doing things to me that I did not like. So during the regression, I was definitely scared. I was crying. I was yelling. I was definitely naked on a table and strapped down, and there was definitely some things happening to me. I don't really care to revisit all of it. Wasn't very. It was actually very traumatic, even when I'm talking about it now. And this is the thing, like with these abductions, a lot of people think they may have dreamed these things, but in the conscious mind, if you think about these things and you've had an abduction, it's not your everyday dream feeling. It's an actual feeling that something happened to you, and when you think about it, it's as if it happened 10 seconds ago, regardless of how long the time has gone by. This is a very traumatic experience, and that's due to the body's chemistry and physical reactions to a trauma. You can't remove that from the body. The body knows that stuff. It is the vehicle of experience, after all. So anyways, yeah, there's all this stuff going on. I'm on this table, I'm crying. When I look around, I not only see these black beings, but I also see human beings, men with clipboards. And they had what I identify as sergeant stripes in colors on their shirts. And this struck me rather odd when I had the regression experience. And again, none of this was biased. I wasn't making this up. I was actually unconscious, recalling these events to the hypnotherapist. And I'd asked him to allow those things to remain in my consciousness so that I could, have access to them, not to wipe them clean. I didn't want to forget. And so this was my first experience with an abduction, really, and with extraterrestrial forces. After this, I remember asking my mom after the hypnosis. I went home and I said, "Mom, did I ever exhibit any weird signs or talk about aliens or anything when I was a kid?" She said, "Yeah, anytime that we watched an alien movie back in the 80s, and it showed any aliens that were like evil or violent in any way, you would get very, very uneasy, very scared, and usually cry or leave the room." I was like, "That's interesting." And I told her the date of my abduction, the date of this scenario. And she remembered that day after this date. And that for weeks after, and she remembered this date for some reason. I think it just struck her as odd that I would sit on the couch and look out the window every night. And when she would ask me what I was doing, I would tell her that I was waiting for them to come back and get me. And so this is a very strange thing. And my mom recalls that date for some particular reason. This stuck out to her. She obviously shrugged it off as like, okay, it's a child. Maybe it's the movies or the TV. But interestingly enough, it made an impression in her consciousness that she remembered the date. And it was the exact day after I had been abducted in this situation. So there's my first one. I have more. There'll be more. But for now, here's this one. I hope you enjoy this. I mean it not to scare anybody. It's a true experience. I've had this experience. And again, I've thought through these things. I'm not a conspiracy theorist or an alien buff or anything like that. This is a genuine experience, and I share it with you openly, unjudgingly, and I hope that you treat it the same way. So, may peace, love, and joy surround you and fill your days.